I guess masking tape's as good as any tape. Obviously got some use out of it. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch! You guys may remember a little bit ago, we started on our custom aluminum dash for the LS3 Swap Defender. That process started with us drawing up a design and cutting our templates out of cardboard with our CNC laser engraver. So here we have our semi-complete Arts and Crafts Edition Custom Defender dashboard. And now that we have our dash mostly designed out, we need to make it. And the laser won't cut aluminum, so that is right, we went ahead and bought ourselves a CNC Plasma Table. And as we like to do around here, we bought a cheap one, which means we bought ourselves some work. But either way, today we are gonna get that guy up and going, and in the future we are gonna use that to cut out our custom aluminum dash. We will be able to manufacture the entire dash in-house in our little Land Rover shop. But beyond that dash, if we have the ability to cut a bunch of metal, what else do you guys think we should cut? In front of me here is the latest addition to the tool lineup in our new Land Rover shop. And as you can clearly see, this guy right here looks much like how many of the Land Rovers start out around here. A bit of a lost cause. This is a Langmuir Crossfire Pro, roughly 4 foot by 3 foot cutting capability. And when we built the shop, I made a space designed specifically for this machine to sit. Although when that was designed, I planned on purchasing a new one. But like many of us out there, I am a sucker for a good deal, and that's quite possibly one of my major downfalls in life. So the other night, before bed, I was scrolling on Facebook Marketplace, as you do, and up popped an ad for a Langmuir Crossfire Pro for $1,500. Complete, working with the plasma unit with just a factory photo. So having this purchase planned for a couple months down the road, but seeing the potential to save a fair amount of money, I get a hold of the gentleman and I set up a time the next morning to go pick the thing up, being it was 3.5 hours away. In the meantime, he updated the pictures in the ad with these. And when he said it needed a cleaning, he wasn't lying. But either way, Ted and I loaded up, hit the road, and went and grabbed this guy. And we were able to score this for just $1,000 total. It was quite the foggy trip, but it made it back in pretty much one piece. But I thought the gray tarps were supposed to be the good ones. And that brings us to today. This thing, as they say, is pretty freaking chooch. We had this nice piece of conduit, professionally bent, holding the torch lead out of the way. We have a random extra stepper motor. It has all the motors it's supposed to have. Just an extra one. And my favorite addition is quite possibly the nicest plasma machine stand I have ever seen. We have some fence panel to whatever that is, welded right to the table. The gentleman upgraded to having torch height control on the machine, which required some wiring on the inside of the plasma unit. I guess masking tape's as good as any tape, and I guess you don't really need to put it back together. But as much as I'm a sucker for a good deal, I'm not in love with junk. So this thing can't be looking like this. The shop is currently looking pretty nice. We have a lot of nice things in it, including our LS3 Swap Defender with a whole bunch of new stuff. We have our nice new fresh looking gantry crane. You just can't have this thing dragging down everything else in the shop. I've previously owned a 4x4 plasma cam, upgraded to a 5x10 bolt hair CNC plasma table. We're now back down to a 4 foot by 3 foot jobber. So I have a little bit of experience in the CNC plasma world, but I will say, restoring one is a first. And the great thing about these is they were designed for some cost-effective shipping. So everything on here, on bolts, everything. Well, almost everything. So the first step with getting this guy whipped back into shape is to give it a nice thorough cleaning. And to do that, we're gonna blow it all apart and drop everything. So the rails that the machine actually runs on are galvanized, so we aren't going to refinish those, but we are going to give them a nice cleaning. So that's going to be our first step, is essentially to get the top part of the machine that the X, Y, and Z axis run on apart and out of the way, including this random motor. Kind of got a bit of a rat's nest going on. The good news is, I'm not exactly sure if I'll ever be able to get this thing back together and functioning properly. I'm not exactly sure what was going on with this disaster. In addition to zip ties, we have duct tape. That's my preferred cable management device. Hands just keep quit working. So that wasn't too bad to get those off. Kind of a neat and relatively simple setup. It actually doesn't have any real play. Our old 5x10 plasma had a dual linear rail with wipers and everything, so this obviously isn't quite as precision running on square tube, but it is encapsulated pretty nicely. And with the accuracy of an air plasma machine, this setup should do just fine. There is a tad bit of grime in there. It's too bad when you buy a machine like this and you just decide to not really take care of it. But at least that works out well for me. If it didn't look like that, wouldn't have got it for $1,000. And here is the nice little water bed. But as you can see, the gentleman obviously got some use out of it, so hopefully he made his money and it was worthwhile for him. Extra motor housing, interesting. But I think this guy's a little bit too on the chooch side to save, and I'm not a huge fan on the modifications that were made, so I think that is destined for the scrap bin. All about saving stuff around here, obviously, because I have so much stuff around here, but some things are just too far gone. I think going back together will fix that too. Everything's all right back there. Well, mostly all right. Testing the durability of the insulation. It's gonna fall. Very careful. Now what? And when we go back together, I think we'll put all the screws in. Normally that should just come apart, but someone was nice enough to weld it together. That's fantastic. As much as I like this little shelf, I'll be real sad to see it go. That actually broke down pretty nicely, all blown apart. Now let's see what we can make happen. We got our little stack of quarters ready. I figured it'd be much easier to get these all sanded if we got most of the gunk off, so we did the old car wash. Freaking muffler froze up. They left us some spare wire. Awfully nice of them. That's pretty wild. I've never had that happen before. I don't know if you could hear it in the video when it slowed down. The little ice balls shooting out of the exhaust on this thing. I guess it's just cold enough outside that as we're compressing the air, we were freezing it up when it slowed down going into the DA. But we got our pieces all sanded smooth, went through a few pieces of paper, and I think I figured out the wobble. All these are cut to the same length, but if you look right there, we're tight this side, and we got like a 1/4 inch gap. So that's jacking everything up. So we're going to slice this off. Then we'll probably throw more than a couple tacks on each of these. I have quite the high-tech paint booth going on here. We got all the hardware, so I'm going to use one of my favorite little tools. And for the little stuff, so we don't lose those guys. But we got the ultrasonic cleaner, and those are going to get whipped back in shape. Look at how sparkly those guys are. I wasn't 100% sure when we got there to purchase this thing, whether or not it would ever be able to be turned into something. But to tell you the truth, it's all starting to look a little bit nicer, and we might actually be able to make something out of it. So Langmuir are pretty good people, because on their website, they have a very detailed instruction booklet. So I think we actually have a shot at getting this thing back together. Alright, so now that everything is lightly bolted together on the base frame, we need to make sure everything is squared up, and after squared up, these two rails need to be very parallel, within 1/32 of an inch, because that is what the y-axis of the plasma runs on. So we need those to be in sync with each other so we're not all jacked up and screwing up our fancy parts we're going to cut out. We'll just start off by doing a little tappy-tappy. This is always fun because you touch one, it messes up the others. Very much a back and forth game. All right, so we got it pretty much squared up. I locked this side down. This side's a little off square, but what I'm gonna do is we're 54 3/4 and 54 5/8, so we're 1/16 off here. So if we go 54 3/4, see if we didn't mess this side up too much. And we are good. So we're gonna lock it down right there. So I'm going to go ahead and put our side brace panels in. And we're going to use these to square up the legs. This is actually starting to look like something, but don't be worried. We got a lot more mess to sort out here. So we're gonna get the gantry put on now that it's cleaned up. For that, I think we're gonna run all the way back with these. Roll it one more time so I have it in the right spot. Like that. So all the bolts that go through a square piece of tube have this little sleeve. It centers the bolt up and doesn't allow you to crush the tube when you tighten it down. If we didn't have this sleeve stopping, when we crank down, it would deform this and create like a U shape down and blow everything out and throw everything out of whack. So that's kind of a simple, low-cost way they're getting by with this tube construction. The use of duct tape for things like this is quite annoying. Well, I mean, I guess... I picked the cleanest sheet or something, a couple of them are pretty rough. Out of the realm of car stuff, you know, like you said, like you don't just keep watching the same shit over and over, so. Well, because I've used YouTube to replace most TV for me, so like you want random. Well, it's slightly better, but hey, at least the duct tape's gone. So now we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and we have this disaster to straighten out. We got some masking tape used as electrical tape, just kind of hanging out the side here. Obviously very dirty, stuff not attached, some more wire splicing there and there, so there's some grime on there. Alright, so now we are going to straighten out this disaster going on here. I have an idea what's going on, but not exactly sure why it's done this way. This could have been because it was an earlier setup. But what we got is these two plugs, and one of them goes to this box, which is part of our torch height control, which is an upgrade for these, and in my opinion a necessary one. Every one of my CNC plasmas has had this, and what it does is it takes the voltage coming out of the plasma itself. I guess let me back up just a hair. So a plasma cutter is similar to a welder, and it transfers voltage from the machine to the metal. Plasma just happens to use air to assist blowing that metal out the bottom instead of welding it together. So what that torch height control does is measure the voltage at the tip of the plasma, and when the distance between the piece of metal you are cutting and the tip of the plasma, this right here, changes, the voltage changes as well. So the computer control system is able to adjust this motor up and down to keep that voltage at the ideal number, which then keeps the torch at the same height across the metal, whether that metal is warped or not. So a lot of times if you're cutting something thin like 16 gauge, as you're cutting it, it'll grow a little bit. And if you didn't have this torch height, the tip of that plasma could run right into it, mess up your cut, mess up your tip, and none of that is good. Keeping the torch at the ideal height throughout the whole cut creates a much cleaner cut, less slag, less angle on the cut edge. So that's what we need. This originally didn't come with it, but was upgraded to it. So that is one of these plugs wired in. That plug goes into this box, then goes out and plugs into here. The other plug is going to be the torch on and off. Originally that would have used one of these, but those are cut on the backside, and it looks like they wired it directly into the board, which is fine. We can make do with that. And what we're going to do is cut these, run it back through the front for a little bit cleaner setup. And then what is also interesting is not only are they spliced here, each of them is spliced towards the end of the plug, and it looks like they swap polarity when doing that. So black goes into red and red goes into black. So I think we're going to swap that back so all the colors match, and when we cut it down here, we'll just we'll swap those side to side. I think that's a better solution to what they got going on. So we'll get the soldering iron back out, and I think we'll do some heat shrink instead of masking tape. Masking tape is usually not the ideal solution for wiring, but hey, do what you got to do. But this is something I very much enjoy with projects like this, where we're going through and fixing what someone else did. You get to turn on your thinking cap a little bit and diagnose what was going on in someone else's head and kind of reverse engineer that and then fix it. So we're going to go right through there. That seems like a good option. Alright, so now we can connect them. Get our heat shrink on. Got to remember to put that on ahead of time. It's kind of hard to get the heat shrink on after the wires are connected. Don't ask me how I know that, but I do. Since we swapped it on the other side, we got to go black to yellow. Get the red one out of the way. We need some heat for the heat shrink. So we got this guy whipped back into shape. Much cleaner setup now. And it's actually put back together. Not looking like a complete pile of junk. So we're pretty much down to just routing some wiring. This X-axis motor, the wire just kind of hangs because that guy goes... I mean, I should probably put in the right one. That one goes there. And that just kind of has to hang loose because that gantry is going to run across here. So that slack, we'll let it travel back and forth. And then this side on the Y, I think we're going to route it through there. That'll be Y1. Snug there. That should be out of the way. Then we got Y2. I think what we're gonna do is run some cushion clamps. These guys here. We'll do one on the bottom of this rail and then a couple along that one and run it through that same hole. Just that guy. Leave a little slack. And for this one, we're going to use an existing hole. Put it on the right way. There we go. I don't know what's up with that one, but we're not going to push our luck. So next up on the wiring front is this right here. Looks like they extended out some wires and had some stuff break before. Right back there we got an eyelet that the wire was pulled out of, and the same on this side. Those two go to the initial torch height sensor, one on each side of it. So with that, right before the machine starts a cut, it plunges down and touches the metal to figure out where the height is. And when it hits the metal, it's got this little float, and that engages a switch, and that locates where the top of the metal is. Yep, that's all we needed to do. So that right there is the little eyelet we need to fix, and I guess while this is a part, we can do a better job cleaning it. So let's pop in here, see what we got. Looks like some of these. Popped off the red insulation off those guys. They should do the trick. On these guys, polarity does not matter because it's just an open and closed circuit. Then on the Z-axis motor, let's see what we got going on here. They got a wire jumped across. I'm guessing it might have had a motor replaced. And it looks like they used a 3-wire control cable, so they had to add one in. What I'm going to do is probably leave this as is until we actually run the machine. Make sure it functions. I don't want to mess with more than I have to, but I believe I actually have some of this 4-wire control cable. So I did actually have some laying around. I got some 2-wire stuff, then we got the correct 4-wire. So once we have this thing up and working, I'll pull this motor apart and we'll actually just run new cable from inside to this point here, and we'll stagger our splices so we don't have one big bundle, and that should prevent a future failure point. The only reason I don't want to do it right now is because this machine was working, so I want to limit how much I'm touching random things like this to leave me causing an additional issue out of the equation and making it harder to diagnose if it happens to not work when we get it together. So we'll fix this after it's running. Now we just need to route these guys back to the control box. And that's done via an overhead tube, which when I was looking was actually this piece that I said was a junk piece of conduit. That went here, not on that little stand that they made before. It's not supposed to have this bend. Let me unbend it here. It's supposed to be something like that. We're gonna fix that though. We're gonna slice this off and extend the tube out. So we got our little rod all painted up. I really do enjoy the simplicity of this whole Langmuir setup. We just have a hole back here that the rod slides into. Then it can just pivot there. I got our wire loomed up so it looks nice and it'll be protected from any sparks and whatnot that may happen. Now I just need to measure how much slack we need. We need to be able to hit over there and not pull this tight. To about there, we should have 47 inches, which would leave us something like that. So we got that guy hung up, zip tied in place, cushion clamp there, and routed underneath. We got this one to plug in, which is the initial height sensor. And then our last motor. Helps if we put it the right way. So now we're pretty much down to just sorting out this mess. So we got our frame here all assembled, pretty much wired up. We're getting close to being ready to cut, but to be able to do that, we're also gonna need something to set the piece of metal on. This is the old tray, and as you can see, it is pretty frickin' chooched. So we gotta come up with something new, and once again, we're gonna do another water tray. You saw Ted stop by earlier and dropped off some steel. This 2" by 1/8" flat bar here will be our new slats that sit in the tray, but we need to bend up a new tray itself, and we'll use that sheet of 16 gauge to do that. The water tray on these is pretty necessary. That is what takes care of the smoke and dust control. So the plasma torch will shoot down and the water will be underneath the piece of metal we're cutting. So the sparks, the air, the slag, everything will go through and get caught in the water. And with a full water tray, that keeps the dust down tremendously. We're still gonna run an exhaust fan to keep the shop tidy for all the stuff that is above the plate, because there's still going to be some smoke and dust, but the water tray will catch the majority of it. So we're going to keep roughly the same outer dimensions, which is 52 by 36. But what I'm going to do different is I'm going to make the lip a little bit taller. These are 2", but I want to be able to suck the water right on up to the bottom of whatever we're cutting. The slats are 2", but they have a 1/4" gap on the bottom. So I think we'll go 2 3/8 on the lip. So when we figure the bend and everything in, it should be right at about 2 1/4. So that means if we're doing 52 inches plus 2 3/8 on each end, 5 1/4 on top of 52. So we need 57 1/4. Not 5 1/4, 4 3/4, so 56 3/4. Then I think we'll do 35 plus 4 3/4, so that'd be 39 3/4. So that's our outer line. We need to make the inner one now. All right, there is our layout, and that leaves us this little square at each corner. That is going to get cut out on all 4 corners. And then the inner line is our bend line. You know what would be really nice to do this cutting? Something like a CNC Plasma Table. Guys should get one. So this guy's a little bit too wide for my metal brake. So on the long sides, I went ahead and cut a little bit of a relief with the angle grinder so we can use this contraption. We'll hammer and dolly that guy straight after we get everything else bent up. It's stuck. So we're probably gonna have to take all these off on the next one. Now that the insulation's done, definitely need to clean up under the mezzanine in the little fab area, but we squeezed the table in. So since this is gonna hold water, I figure we should put something to empty it of that water. We're gonna do just a little pipe thread, something like that. Simple, simple. Then on the opposite side, we're gonna sink a bolt for our grounding point for the plasma cutter itself. Try not to mess up our new paint job. That makes a real big difference on this thing looking like it's actually something usable. Surprisingly enough, we were able to salvage the slat holders. And by looking at this, I wasn't quite sure it would happen. But that flat bar there will get chopped up and slot into these guys. Went ahead and ground down the edge on each of them, and that will contact the bottom of this. And then when we connect the ground from the plasma to the bolt there, the bare slats will complete the circuit with the slats in there and the metal we're cutting sitting on top. Now it looks like a table, and raising the sides worked out nicely. The slats are just slightly below the top edge, so we'll be able to put the water right up to the bottom of the material and contain as much smoke as possible. Not quite sure what happened there. We got a little wild with the grinder, but I just noticed these screws are wrong. They should be going in from this side because that holds the bearing in place. So the way this is now, we could probably just pull this lead screw out. The joys of other people's projects. Much better. All right, so here goes nothing. We got everything hooked up. It'll be our first time turning it on. So we're gonna hit the switch here. Hopefully nothing goes bang. We just heard the motors lock up. So what we need to do now is tighten all our couplers. We left them loose. So we're all connected to our machine here. Let's see if it moves. If we did everything right, we should be able to jog the machine with the arrows on the keyboard. That sounds decent. Let's see if we left enough slack in the cable. So this is the initial test run file from Langmuir. It just starts right there and goes all the way to the opposite end of the table. So we'll run this, make sure everything's kosher. Big success. It actually sounds pretty decent. So I think we're in good shape. So that means it's time to fill the water table and maybe hook up a plasma torch. See if we can actually make a part. The lead screws definitely had some junk on it. The wipers knocked a bunch off, but they look awfully clean now, so that's good. One thing I'm going to do before I load this thing with water and add some more weight, it's going to hold about 15 gallons, I think. So what's that, another 120 pounds or so. I'm going to square up the front edge of the water table with the gantry. That way when we're throwing a piece of metal on to cut, we can just measure off this front lip to get it close to square. Right here we are a little under an inch. 1.25 inches is about perfect. That's good, there. All right, so now it is time to play chemist. This is an old recipe we've used in the past, but do your own research. Don't take my word on mixing any sort of chemicals together. But we're gonna start off with some sodium nitrite. That's nitrite, not nitrate. We're not making bombs. This is gonna be added to the water to keep table, slats, and the parts you cut from rusting. For 75 gallons, you put 1/4 pound of this. We're doing about 15 gallons, so we'll shoot for about 1 ounce. Might be a tad heavy. And just so no one drinks it, I think we're gonna add a little food coloring. Not quite sure how much we're supposed to do. The instructions don't actually give you an amount for a plasma table. They do it for like cupcakes and dyeing eggs, but not this. We are looking mighty fancy now. The green does kind of give it a neat look. Now we just need a plasma torch. And that guy happens to be right here. But like everything else on this, we got something interesting going on. I'm not quite sure why we disassembled the torch, made an angle bracket, but we're gonna get rid of that. There. Something like that. Eventually, I'd like to order a machine torch instead of the hand one. Those are vertical, much easier to square up, and the routing of the cable is much nicer. Because this is a hand torch, and that's a machine torch, so obviously a machine torch is probably more ideal on a machine. Who'd have thunk? All right, we got a sheet of steel loaded up. We're gonna turn this guy on for the first time. And nothing. Probably need to turn the breaker on. Much better. All right, so we got that figured out. I guess it's the moment of truth. I mean, I guess for the first one, not a complete disaster. Not any good. Try it again. We made one of these! So monumental moment for our little custom Land Rover shop here. That right there is our first piece, and turned out reasonable. What is it? Well, nothing to do with Land Rovers. I'm sure some stores around you guys have similar operations as the Aldi grocery store does around us. Their carts are locked together with quarters, so they don't need cart returns. Stick a quarter in, it unlocks it from the next one. You return it, you get your quarter back. While that guy replaces a quarter, goes on your keychain, also opens a bottle for a little refreshment after strenuous grocery shopping. But no, that is super exciting to see this thing working. We were told by the gentleman we got it from that it did work, but we weren't able to test it, so you know how that goes. But we need to get some consumables ordered, and once we have some fresh nozzles and tips, we'll be able to dial in all our settings and get some nice clean cuts. No sense in wasting the time dialing it in on wore out consumables. Then we're gonna start playing with the dashboard on the LS3 Defender. But before that, I think the first project will be to make a tray for the plasma unit itself underneath here. And I think we'll also make a space for a computer tower. I still have the desktop from our old CNC Plasma. I think we'll use that. Happens to have like 10,000 frickin' files on it from cutting in the past. That'll be useful. The best part of this whole deal is with about $40 worth of paint, $100 worth of steel, and a little bit of sweat equity, we were able to save $3,500 over purchasing a new one. It's not quite as good as new, but saving $3,500 makes me pretty happy. With that being said, appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing, and I'm super happy to have another useful tool to help us build all the fun Land Rovers around here. We'll catch you guys on the next one. And in some other fun news, we're happening to get somewhere on the broken BMW.
Oh, why is it green? Oh, it's Jell-O. Duh.